Have you ever walked through your city center at dusk and felt a cold prickle on the back of your neck as you passed a statue in the town square? Not the chill of the evening air, but something deeper. An instinctual recognition that the man of bronze staring down at you is not a hero, but a prisoner. He stands on a pedestal worth millions of dollars. He is crafted with a level of anatomical precision that modern sculptors struggle to replicate. Yet he has no name. Look at the plaque. It does not say, Architect Julian Vance, or in memory of Master Builder Elias Thorne. It simply says, the architect. Or perhaps the physician, the scholar, the navigator. Why would a city commission an expensive masterpiece to honor a specific individual and then systematically erase their identity? This is not art. This is a crime scene. Welcome to CipherHistory. Today we are looking through the cracks of the 19th century matrix to uncover the most massive psychological operation ever conducted on humanity. A global campaign of erasing names to replace them with silence. Think about the street you live on, the old stone building on the corner, the park where you walk your dog. Official history tells you these were built by pioneers with horse-drawn carriages and primitive tools. But if you look at the statues guarding these cities, you see a different story. You see men in clothing from the 1700s depicted in statues supposedly built in the 1890s. During a decade-long cross-reference of municipal archives, I discovered a pattern that shouldn't exist. In the late 1800s, city after city across Europe, North America, and even Asia began a strange ritual. They erected monuments to unnamed professionals. In Prague, a nameless mathematician. In Boston, a nameless engineer. In Odessa, a nameless chronicler. All of them share the same haunting characteristic. Their faces are not generic allegories like Lady Justice. They are portraits. They have unique wrinkles, specific scars, asymmetric features. These were real people. But the records describing who they were are gone. Not just lost, gone. Whenever you find one of these statues, you find a black hole in the local archive. The committee minutes from the year of installation are water damaged. The sculptor's contract is missing. The local newspaper for that week was destroyed in a fire. 1 is a coincidence. 10 is a mystery. Thousands of them across 5 continents is a synchronized narrative. Someone wanted to preserve these men in stone while ensuring their names would never be whispered again. Why? Because if you knew their names, you would find their work. And if you found their work, you would realize that the history books in your school are a total fabrication. You are living in a city built by ghosts. And the statues are the only evidence left of a civilization that was erased to make room for yours. The year 1895 marks a dead zone in human memory. It was the year the names finally stopped. After 1895, the world stopped building monuments to anonymous geniuses. Why? Because the transition was complete. The old world was dead. The new world was born. And the inhabitants of the new world had been successfully brainwashed to believe they were the first ones here. Look closely at the statue in your town square. Is he holding a compass? A map? A strange device that looks like a radio but is labeled as a decorative tool. He is trying to tell you who he was, but the Matrix has silenced him. Imagine spending your entire life building the foundations of a city. You designed the power grids, the intricate stone waterways, and the grand cathedrals that seem to resonate with a frequency no one understands anymore. Then, a new power rises. They don't just kill you, They wait for you to die. And then they steal your work. They keep your buildings because they need them, but they erase your bloodline. This is the phenomenon of preservation through anonymity. Let's look at the social proof hidden in plain sight. From 1870 to 1895, the world witnessed an impossible explosion of monument building. In the United States alone, thousands of bronze and stone figures appeared in newly settled cities. Official history calls this the golden age of neoclassicism. But there is a glaring contradiction. If you consult textile historians about these statues, they will point out something unsettling. The clothing on these unnamed men, the tight waistcoats, the specific embroidery of the lapels, the style of the boots, dates back to the mid-17th century. Yet, the plaques at the base of the statues claim they were cast and erected in the 1880s. Why would the 19th century elite spend a fortune to commemorate their ideals by dressing them in fashions that were over 100 years out of date? The standard academic answer is artistic choice. They tell us it was a romantic callback to a previous era. But that logic collapses when you look at the tools these statues are holding. These aren't just artistic props. In the hands of the navigator, found in landlocked regions of Central Europe, you see instruments that resemble astrolabes, but contain extra dials and gears that don't match any known 18th century technology. In the hands of the engineer, you see scrolls depicting architectural layouts of star forts, complex geometric bastions that official history says were obsolete and useless, yet they are found perfectly preserved under the foundations of your very own city. And then there are the gaps. When you investigate the municipal archives for these monuments, you hit a wall of structural silence. I contacted an archivist in a major European city, someone who had spent 40 years cataloging the 19th century records. When I asked her why the minutes for the Commission of Public Works were missing for exactly the 3-year period when their largest city square monument was installed, she went pale. She didn't say it was a coincidence. She said, "I always wondered about that." Then she looked around the room and changed the subject. The silence isn't the lack of information. It is a presence. It is a deliberate removal of data. These statues were the final payoff of a massive re-education campaign. Think about it. If you were a child in 1890, you would see these statues every day. You would ask your father, "Who is that man?" And your father, already processed by the new educational system, would say, "That's just a symbol of science, son." In 2 generations, the man's real name, the man who actually mapped the ley lines of your province or built the atmospheric energy collectors on top of the local church, is gone. He has been successfully downgraded from a historical fact to a decorative myth. But why the rush? Why did this pattern stop so abruptly in 1895? Because by then, the old world, the Tartarian architecture, the free energy systems, the global unified culture, had been successfully rebranded. The great exhibitions and world's fairs of the late 1800s acted as the cleaning crew. They gathered the last remnants of the old technology, showcased them as temporary attractions, and then burned them to the ground or hid them behind these nameless bronze faces. You aren't just looking at a statue. You are looking at a tombstone for a truth that was too dangerous to be named. The man on that pedestal knew how your city was really powered. He knew who lived here before the Great Fire, or the mud flood that supposedly wiped out the records. And the most terrifying part? He might be your ancestor. Your very own surname might have been changed, your family tree pruned, just like the plaque on that statue was chiseled clean. If you think this is just a European or American mystery, You are underestimating the scale of the matrix. This unnaming ritual was a global synchronized event. It was the birth of the modern world's administrative control. Let's talk about the rededication process, the most aggressive form of historical hijacking. In my research, I found a fragment of a council minute from a city in Eastern Europe dated 1922. It wasn't a record of a new monument. It was a directive for the modification of existing public assets. The order was simple: remove the nameplates, recarve the facial hair if necessary, and assign a new generic title. Imagine the level of audacity required to take a man who lived, breathed, and built and turn him into a symbol. This explains why so many statues from the late 19th century have stylistic anachronisms. You'll see a statue executed in 1820s neoclassicism, the actual technique, the actual chemical composition of the bronze, but the city record claims it was made in 1890. How is that possible? It's only possible if the statues were already there. They were the survivors of a previous era. When the new administrators took over after the mid-century global catastrophes, they didn't destroy everything. They couldn't. The infrastructure was too valuable. Instead, they reskinned the history. They took the statues of the previous masters and, because they couldn't explain who they were without revealing the existence of a forbidden empire, they simply wiped the slates clean. But the physical evidence is screaming at us. Take a look at the navigator statues in cities that are now hundreds of miles away from any coastline. Official history says these represent the spirit of discovery. But look at the maps they are holding in their bronze hands. If you zoom in with a high-resolution lens, you see territorial boundaries that don't match any 19th century map. You see coastlines that haven't existed since the sea levels shifted. These aren't ideals. These are records. And then there are the outliers, the chroniclers. Why would a city in the 1880s honor an anonymous historian? Because there was a history that needed to be rewritten. These statues mark the transition points. They are the guardians of the reset. Think about the great fires that hit almost every major city between 1850 and 1900. Chicago, Boston, London, Moscow, Tokyo. Every time a city burned, the archives burned with it. And every time the city was rebuilt, these unnamed statues appeared. It's as if the fire was the eraser, and the nameless statue was the new blank page. You were told that your ancestors were primitive. You were told that before the Industrial Revolution, life was dark, dirty, and short. But the nameless man on the pedestal is wearing a silk frock coat and holding a device that looks like a modern frequency calibrator. He is mocking the narrative. He is a glitch in the matrix that they forgot to delete. Why should you care? Because the same system that erased his name is currently managing your life. The same institutions that lost the records of the 1870s are the ones telling you what to believe about your health, your money, and your future. If they can hide an entire civilization in plain sight, using nothing but bronze and silence, what are they hiding from you right now? The architect isn't just a statue. He is a mirror. He is what happens to a civilization when it loses its memory. And if you don't start asking who he really was, you might be the next one to have your identity chiseled away. The final payoff of this mystery is not found in a library or a museum. It is found in the mirror. The greatest trick the architects of our current timeline ever pulled was convincing you that you are an individual with a unique history, while simultaneously cutting the umbilical cord to your true past. When they took the names off those statues, they weren't just protecting a secret. They were testing a method. They wanted to see if they could replace a man's soul with a title. And it worked. Today, we look at the physician, and we see a job description. We don't see a father, a rebel, or a scientist who perhaps discovered a cure that we are no longer allowed to use. We look at the scholar, and we see an abstract concept of learning, not the man who tried to warn us that the stars were moving, or that the maps were being redrawn to hide landmasses beyond the ice. This is the totalitarian silence that guards the reset. If you can't name the person who built your world, you can't claim your inheritance. You become a tenant in your own civilization, paying rent to a system that simply squatted in the ruins of a much greater empire. But the statues are beginning to speak. As more people like you, here on CipherHistory, start to notice the stylistic anachronisms, the missing archive years, and the impossible technology held in bronze hands, the matrix begins to fray. Every time you point at a nameless statue and ask, "Who were you?" a thread of the official lie unspools. Don't let them tell you it's just art. Art doesn't require the systematic destruction of municipal records. Art doesn't follow a synchronized global pattern of anonymity across 5 continents during the exact same 20-year window. The man in your town square is waiting for you to recognize him. He isn't a symbol. He is a witness. He is the guardian of a truth so powerful that they had to kill his memory to keep you in the dark. So, the next time you walk past that weathered bronze face, stop. Look into those eyes. Because the silence of the statues is the loudest proof we have that our history was stolen. If you have a nameless statue in your city, or if you found a local record that makes no sense, share it in the comments below. Let's start putting the names back on the pedestals. I am CipherHistory, and we are the ones who remember what was meant to be forgotten. Subscribe or stay trapped in the matrix. The choice is yours.